जय। लाडली लाल की श्री गुरवे नमः। श्री गुरवे नमः। श्री गुरवे नमः। आचार्य मां विजानीयान् नावमन्येत कर्हिचित् नमर्त्य बुद्ध्या सूयेत सर्वदेव मयो गुरु। हे परम प्रियतम,
हे परम प्रियतम,
पूर्णतम पुरुषोत्तम श्री कृष्ण,
पूर्णतम पुरुषोत्तम श्री कृष्ण,
तुमसे विमुख होने के कारण,
तुमसे विमुख होने के कारण
अनादिकाल से हमने,
अनादिकाल से हमने
अनंतानंत दुख पाए,
अनंतानंत दुख पाए,
एवं पा रहे हैं,
एवं पा रहे हैं।
पाप करते करते,
पाप करते करते
अंतःकरण
अंतःकरण
इतना मलिन हो चुका है,
इतना मलिन हो चुका है
कि रसिकों द्वारा,
कि रसिकों द्वारा
यह जानने पर भी,
यह जानने पर भी
कि तुम अपनी भुजाओं को पसारे,
कि तुम अपनी भुजाओं को पसारे,
अपनी वात्सल्यमयी दृष्टि से,
अपनी वात्सल्यमयी दृष्टि से
हमारी प्रतीक्षा कर रहे हो,
हमारी प्रतीक्षा कर रहे हो।
तुम्हारी शरण में नहीं आ पाता,
तुम्हारी शरण में नहीं आ पाता।
हे अशरण शरण,
हे अशरण शरण,
तुम्हारी कृपा के बिना,
तुम्हारी कृपा के बिना
तुम्हें कोई जान भी तो नहीं सकता,
तुम्हें कोई जान भी तो नहीं सकता।
ऐसी स्थिति में,
ऐसी स्थिति में
हे अकारण करुण,
हे अकारण करुण,
पतित पावन श्री कृष्ण,
पतित पावन श्री कृष्ण,
तुम अपनी अहेतुकी कृपा से ही,
तुम अपनी अहेतुकी कृपा से ही
हमको अपना लो,
हमको अपना लो।
हे करुणा सागर,
हे करुणा सागर,
हम भुक्ति मुक्ति आदि,
हम भुक्ति मुक्ति आदि
कुछ नहीं मांगते,
कुछ नहीं मांगते।
हमें तो केवल,
हमें तो केवल
तुम्हारे निष्काम प्रेम की ही,
तुम्हारे निष्काम प्रेम की ही
एकमात्र चाह है,
एकमात्र चाह है।
हे नाथ,
हे नाथ,
अपने विरद की ओर देखकर,
अपने विरत की ओर देखकर
इस अधम को निराश न करो,
इस अधम को निराश न करो।
हे जीवन धन,
हे जीवन धन,
अब बहुत हो चुका,
अब बहुत हो चुका।
अब तो तुम्हारे प्रेम के बिना,
अब तो तुम्हारे प्रेम के बिना
यह जीवन मृत्यु से भी अधिक भयानक है।
मृत्यु से भी अधिक भयानक है।
अतएव प्रेम भिक्षाम देहि,
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 प्रेम भिक्षाम देहि।
साकेत बिहारी श्री राघवेंद्र सरकार की
जय।
वृंदावन बिहारी श्री यादवेंद्र सरकार की
जय।
श्रीमद सद्गुरु सरकार की
जय।
जय जय श्री राधे, जय जय श्री राधे, जय जय श्री राधे। मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम की बनाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम की बनाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मेरी 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 दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम की बनाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ,
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ।
तो ही चुनरी चढ़ई हो 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 दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
ओ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
ओ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
ओ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ।
तेरी महिमा न जाने विधि हरि हर 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 माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तेरी महिमा न जाने विधि हरि हर 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 माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाई दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही मोही शाम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
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 ओ मेरी 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 दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
तू ही सीता तू ही राधा तू ही दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम से मिलाए दे 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 दुर्गे माँ।
मैं हूँ तेरा शिशु तू है मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मैं हूँ तेरा शिशु तू है मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मैं हूँ तेरा शिशु तू है मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मैं हूँ तेरा शिशु तू है मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
तूने सीता से मिलाया राम 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 दुर्गे माँ।
तूने गोपी को मिलाया श्याम 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 दुर्गे माँ।
ओ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
ओ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
तूने सीता से मिलाया राम दुर्गे माँ।
तूने सीता से मिलाया राम दुर्गे माँ।
तूने गोपी को मिलाया श्याम 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 दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा श्याम से करा दे ब्याह दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा
जय हो।
श्याम से करा दे ब्याह दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा 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 श्याम से करा दे ब्याह दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
ओ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा श्याम से करा दे ब्याह 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 दुर्गे माँ।
तूने गोपी को मिलाया श्याम दुर्गे माँ।
तूने गोपी को मिलाया श्याम दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा श्याम से करा दे ब्याह दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा श्याम से करा दे ब्याह दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा श्याम की मेरी श्याम की बना दे जोरी दुर्गे माँ।
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 हाँ जोरी दुर्गे माँ।
जोरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी श्याम की बना दे 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 जोरी दुर्गे माँ।
जीव ब्रह्म 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 की बना दे जोरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरा श्याम से करा दे ब्याह 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 दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही श्याम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
तेरा ऋणी मैं रहूंगी सदा 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 दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
ओ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
हाँ मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
मेरी दुर्गे माँ।
ओ 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 जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
जय हो जय हो
जय हो
जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
ओ जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो जय हो दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम की बनाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम की बनाई दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
मोही शाम से मिलाए दे दुर्गे माँ।
दुर्गा है राधा अंश। दुर्गा है राधा अंश। गोविंद राधे। दुर्गा जू की जय जयकार करा दे।
दुर्गा है राधा अंश। गोविंद राधे। दुर्गा
जू
की जय जयकार की जय जयकार करा दे।
जय 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 दुर्गा मैया, जय 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 दुर्गा मैया। गोविंद राधे कृपा करी मोकु, कृष्ण प्रेम दिला दे।
जय 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 दुर्गा मैया, गोविंद राधे कृपा करी मोकु, कृष्ण प्रेम दिला दे।
जय 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 दुर्गा मैया, गोविंद राधे कृपा करी मोकु, कृष्ण प्रेम दिला दे।
जय 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 दुर्गा मैया, गोविंद राधे कृपा करी मोहि, प्रेम दिला दे।
कृपा करी मोकु, कृष्ण प्रेम दिला दे।
करी मोकु, कृष्ण प्रेम दिला दे।
बोल दुर्गा मैया की, अलबेली सरकार की।
श्रीमद् सद्गुरु सरकार की, श्रीमद् युगल सरकार की। ध्यानमूलम् गुरोर्मूर्तिः, पूजामूलम् गुरोर्पदम्, मन्त्रमूलम् गुरोर्वाक्यम्, भक्तिमूलम् गुरोर्कृपा। हृदं भोजे कृष्णः सजलजलदश्यामलतनुः, सरोजाक्षः स्रग्वीमुकुटकटकाद्याभरणवान्, शरद्राकानाथ प्रतिमवदनः श्रीमुरलिका वहन्ध्येयो गोपीगण परिवृतः कुङ्कुमचितः नयनं गलदश्रुधारया वदनं गद्गद रुद्धया गिरा पुलकैर्निचितं वपुः कदा तव नाम ग्रहणे भविष्यति यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तग्वंह देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये। Please join me in chanting the divine names of God. Bhajo Giridhar Govind Gopala Giridhar Govind Gopala Giridhar Govind Gopala Bhajo Giridhar Govind Gopala Giridhar Govind Gopala Bhajo 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 गिरिधर गोविंद गोपाला
भज गिरिधर गोविंद गोपाला।
श्रीमद् सद्गुरु सरकार की। Dear devotees of Sri Maharaj Ji, respected viewers, Radhe Radhe. Elaborating on the topic, how to conquer material desires. In my last two discourses, I explained that inherent, innate, within every individual under the influence of Maya has a deep-seated desire for happiness. It is inherent, it is innate within every individual soul to expect happiness, pleasure, joy. Our scriptures describe that happiness as Yo vai bhuma tat sukham, Chandogya Upanishad. That the nature of the happiness that we desire as individuals is unlimited, it is infinite, it is immeasurable, and it is ever increasing. Sri Maharaj Ji has enlightened us through one of his compositions, Radha Govind Geet. Anand paane ki गोविंद राधे जीव में नित्य आकांक्षा बता दे. So, to attain happiness within every individual soul, nitya, ever, always, that inclination is there. It is eternal, it is incessant. Further, Sri Maharaj Ji tells us, Jiva chaha Krishnananda गोविंद राधे जो है अनंत दिव्य नित्य बता दे. जीव चाह, the soul wants, is aspiring for Krishnananda, the divine bliss of Supreme Brahma Shri Krishna. And that bliss is Ananta, it is infinite, it is divine, and it is eternal. This is what we are expecting to experience every moment in our life. Over the course of infinite lifetimes, we have endeavored to seek inner fulfillment through material means. but to no avail whatsoever. All of our efforts, our attempts proved futile. We still find ourselves wailing and wandering in this world in ignorance, going from door to door begging. We are begging. Everyone around us in our life, people, we're begging them to give us. But how could they give us when they themselves are devoid of that happiness? How could they? So, saints, they describe our ignorance through an example. So our efforts have been in vain. So, if we have milk and we churn milk, what do we get? Butter. Churn milk and we get butter. But over the course of incessant efforts, perpetual efforts, we have not succeeded. Why? Because we conducted our search in the wrong place. So while we can extract butter from milk, what did we do? In hopes of extracting butter, in our ignorance, thinking of ourselves as being very intelligent and capable, what did we do? We churned whitewash. That is what we did. So while our goal has always been perfect, our approach has been defective, flawed. That is what has happened. Sri Maharaj also quotes the example of, just to illustrate our ignorance, he quotes the example of our eyes. The function of the eyes is to perceive, and the function of the ears is to hear words, speech. What did we try to do? We tried to perform the function of the eyes through our ears. That is what we tried to do. So how could we expect to succeed when our efforts have been so unscientific? No. So as a remedy to this problem, saints, they advised us that if we transcend the realm of desires, yes, we can have complete peace of mind. We can experience peace, happiness, joy forever. And yet, saints and scriptures tell us that for as long as we are under the influence of Maya, it is impossible to overcome or to conquer desires. So, this eternal riddle or this contradiction for our welfare, for our spiritual upliftment and well-being, saints have bestowed their mercy upon us souls and reconciled these contradictions. Sri Maharaji has told us, Kamana kabhu mitena Govind Radhe Hari Guru Seva ki Kamana bana de. Radha Govind Geet. So, Sri Maharaji has reconciled these contradictions, and he tells us that while it is impossible to eliminate desires or to end desires, what is very possible is to divert them from the world to God. Change the field of desires from the material realm to the divine realm. That is what we have been advised by saints and scriptures. That is what we have to do. But when people hear this knowledge, when they hear this, diverting desires from the world to God, they wonder how it is practically possible, given the fact that we only have one mind. So the mind can either be engaged in the world or it can be engaged in God. Moreover, people misinterpret this knowledge. And they think that perhaps the scriptures and the saints are telling us to renounce the world. To renounce the world, quit all worldly activities. No, go to the jungle and worship God, meditate on God. Everything should just come to an end. But the science behind this, the secret lies, when the question comes as to how can this be practically possible? The secret lies in understanding, comprehending the knowledge. And this is where the philosophy of Karma Yoga comes into play. When Sri Krishna told Arjuna in the Gita, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara. So when Sri Krishna gave the teachings to Arjuna in the Gita, he told him that remember me all the time, remember me every moment while you perform your duties. That is what Sri Krishna told Arjuna. Now, for us individuals, this seems to be a serious problem. Why? Because seeing with the eyes and hearing with the ears without the involvement of the mind doesn't seem possible. Seeing with the eyes and hearing with the ears without the involvement of the mind doesn't seem possible. And we experience, as individuals, we do experience that when our mind is preoccupied with something, then our senses are incapable of performing their respective actions, or functions, rather. How is it possible to engage in any action that requires full attention, full concentration without the involvement of the mind and the intellect, rather? How is that possible? And at the same time, remember God? It is impossible. It seems impossible. Let us analyze this for a moment. You see, there are two kinds of actions. Those that involve the mind and the intellect only. And then there's another kind of action that involves the mind and the intellect, but with attachment. Two kinds of actions. So Sri Maharaji tells us that if we can understand the difference between these two kinds of actions, then the concept of Karma Yoga becomes immediately clear. And what I'm about to point out to you is not something new, but it is something that we already know. All I'm going to do is illustrate it, this point, through an example. Suppose a faithful wife who, being very attached to her husband, prepares delicious dishes for her husband who has returned home after being away for 4 years. So after he has had the meal, she asks, "How was the meal?" And his reply is, "It was absolutely delicious." In the evening, for some reason, she could not cook the meal for him, so she asked the servant to prepare the meal. Serving his master, the servant asked him the same question that the wife had asked. And so the reply he got was exactly the same. Very delicious, the same reply that the wife was given earlier in the day. Now observe that even though the actions of the wife and the servant were the same, and the food that was prepared was equally delicious and tasty, nevertheless, there is an important difference. The actions of the wife not only involved her mind and intellect, but her attachment to her husband. While the cook, his actions involved only the mind and the intellect and were free of any kind of attachment. How do we know this? Because later, after the husband had his meal, the wife went to her friend's house and, dancing with joy and embracing her, she said, "Oh, my husband has come back. He has returned from being away for 4 years." The cook said to his wife, "God alone knows where he just came from. Suddenly, it took 4 hours to cook the meal. I am totally exhausted." A cook's job is the worst in the world. Because the wife is attached to her husband, she is also attached to the work that she's doing. In other words, the food that she prepared that food with attachment because she is also attached to her husband. That's one scenario. The cook, however, he did the same work, but he experienced no pleasure whatsoever from preparing that food. Why? Because his attachment is somewhere else. It is somewhere else. So in the same way, just as the cook he is attached to his family, to his wife, and to his children, and prepared the food in a detached spirit, in a detached manner. In the same way, we, aspiring souls on the path of devotion, should lovingly engage our mind in the loving thoughts of God, and physically perform our worldly duties without expecting to derive any pleasure from those activities. So, on the basis of this knowledge, we understand that one does not have to renounce the world. It is not about that. Rather, it is about transferring the attachment to God. That is what Karma Yoga is. Karma, physical duty; yoga, attachment of the mind in God. Now, what is the practical implication of this? How do we practically accomplish this or apply this in our life? Now, first, knowledge. The first step. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And that step is knowledge. Spiritual, divine knowledge. Who am I? Why am I in this world? What is the grace of God? What does surrender to God mean? What are the 3 paths described in the scriptures to God realization, etc.? How do I practice devotion? So all this knowledge we must acquire through the guidance or under the guidance of a God-realized personality. And what will this knowledge do for us? What will it do for us? It will enable our intellect that is confused. It will help our intellect to become decisive. At present, our intellect is indecisive. And what do I mean by that? Indecisive, in other words, our intellect is under the sway of Maya. It is under the sway of ignorance, believing that there is happiness in this world. If I didn't get it today, I will get it tomorrow. I have $100,000 in my bank. I know that if I get $200,000, I will be doubly happy. And if I get $500,000, then that's it. I will be ecstatically rich and I wouldn't care for anything more. So this ignorance prevails. It has led us in the cycle, or to revolve in the cycle of birth and death endlessly. It is the decision of the intellect. Like Sri Maharaj ji says, इस बुद्धि देवी ने हमारे अनंत जन्म खराब किए हैं. बुद्धि देवी ने, इस बुद्धि देवी ने ही हमें घुमाया है अनंत जन्मों में, अनंत बार. So our intellect will become decisive. We will begin to understand, we will begin to embrace, we will begin to realize that true happiness does not lie in the objects of the 5 senses that we are constantly chasing. No. In fact, true happiness lies in God. But is that enough? Just knowing about it, listening to knowledge, is that enough? No, that's not enough. The saints warn us that dry knowledge, intellectual knowledge, it's only the beginning. It has to be experienced. That's why they talk about theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge. So all this knowledge that we comprehend on the basis of the faculty of knowledge known as our intellect, intelligence, or buddhi. God has given us buddhi, right? We discriminate between right and wrong. So when we receive this knowledge, then beyond that, we embark, we pursue practice, abhyas. So what are those devotional practices that we need to adopt in order to apply practically this knowledge, put it into practice. Our scriptures, they make reference to numerous devotional practices. So which one is best for us to adopt? For a novice, this can be very confusing. Very confusing. And without the guidance of a true God-realized personality, true spiritual master, reading the scriptures on your own is a very precarious task. So as the reconciler of all apparent contradictions in the scriptures and the writings of the masters, great masters of our age, Sri Maharaj's scriptural omniscience has astounded even the great philosophers and scholars. Whatever Sri Maharaji uttered through his lotus lips, whatever he said, whatever he wrote, he authenticated everything. He authenticated everything he advocated with scriptural quotations, verses, making reference to the scriptures. And thereby he proved that whatever he advocated in a simplistic, modern style or manner had in fact been advocated since beginningless time. So what is the answer to this common quandary? What are those practices that we need to adopt to pursue the path? As I mentioned, the first step is knowledge. So the scriptures answer our question. What are those? Nama lila gunadina muchair bhasha tu kirtanam. Rupa Goswami Ji describes in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ji has described Cheto darpana marjanam bhavamaha davagni nirvapanam shreyah kairava chandrika vitaranam vidyavadhu jivanam anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam Purnamrita svadanam sarvatmasnapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Ashtapadi of Gauranga Mahaprabhuji, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhuji. Asya jananto namachid vivaktana mahaste Vishnu sumatim bhajamahe Rigved. Tamustotarah purvayam yathavidritasya garbham janushapi partana Rigved. Marta amaratasya te bhuri nam manamahe Rigved. Sadate nam svayasho vivakmi Rigved. Trataramindram avitaramindram have Yajurved. Upaprayanto advaram mantram voche magnaye Ved. Vedavyas tells us, Kaler doshanidhera jannasti yeko mahan gunah kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangah paramam brajet Ved. Bhagavatam, rather. Krite yadhyayato vishnum tretayam yajato makhaihi dvapare paricharyayam kalo tadhari kirtanat. Bhagavatam. Krita juga sab jogi vigyani kari hari dhyan tarahi bhav prani treta vividha yagya nara karahi Prabhu hi samarpi karma bhav tarahi dvapar kari raghupati pad puja नर भव तरहि उपाय न दूजा कलियुग केवल हरि गुण गाहा गावत नर पावहि भव थाहा रामायण कली नहीं कर्म न भगति विवेकु राम नाम अवलंबन एकु एहि कलिकाल न साधन दूजा जोग न जप तप व्रत मख पूजा राम जपू राम जपू राम जपू बावरे घोर भव नीर निधि नाम निज नावरे. So what is the answer? The scriptures, they tell us that the easiest, the best and the easiest process to adopt to attain our ultimate goal is sankirtan or congregational chanting. Kirtan has been described as chanting aloud the names and the virtues and the attributes and the pastimes of God. And this kirtan has been practiced according to the Vedas since time immemorial, since eternity. And so it has been described as the easiest and the surest and the most effective means of realizing God. All the scriptures, they advocate this knowledge, this truth, that chanting of the divine names is the simplest and the most direct path of divine attainment in this age of Kali. You may wonder, with so much chanting going on these days in the world, why isn't anyone realizing God? There's so much chanting going on. There are public non-stop sankirtans going on, and paid professionals, they make a living doing sankirtan as celebratory functions. Have these people realized God? While some others might say that they have called the name of their son or their daughter with a name of God, and they have uttered that name innumerable times in their life, and yet they have not realized God. So, how can we say that singing the divine names of God can unite us with God or can take us to God? The answer is, it cannot. It cannot. Merely chanting the divine names of God mechanically without the involvement of the mind will not lead you to God. We must first, through scriptural knowledge, understand the efficacy, the effectiveness of God's divine name. That is what we need to do. Gauranga Mahaprabhuji has described in his Ashtapadi, Nam Namakari Bahudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrarpita Niyamitaha Smaranena Kalaha Etadrishi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaiva Midrishamiha Janina Nuragaha. Gauranga Mahaprabhuji describes that Sri Krishna, God, resides in His divine name. He has established himself in his own divine name. In fact, the divine names, the form, the virtues, the pastimes, the abode, and the saints of God are all virtually the same. They are all synonymous, and they each reside in each other. So God is so merciful that he has seated himself with all of his divine powers within his name, within his own divine name. So the prime ingredient to chanting the names, the attributes, the leelas, is to cultivate faith. Cultivate faith in his presence, in the name. Cultivate the divine presence of God within his own name. When I say cultivate faith in his presence, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is we engage our mind in the loving remembrance of God, who is seated in his own divine name. So we have to nurture that faith. Faith breeds faith. So how do we gauge our faith? How? There's an ancient story described by Sri Maharaji that serves as a benchmark for us all. There was once a priest who was working in a temple, and his service was to serve deities the food. So an 8-year-old boy used to stay with him. So one day the priest had to go out somewhere, and so he instructed the boy to serve the food to the deities just like he did, in exactly the same way. So after the priest had left, the boy, he served the food. And every so often he would peek behind the curtains to see if God had eaten the food. But much to his dismay, the food remained untouched. So the little boy thought, well, maybe they're mad because the priest is gone. So the next day he served the food again, but again the food remained untouched. And so this continued for several days, until finally, out of exhaustion, the little boy said, "You have left me with no option but to take matters into my own hands." So brandishing a big stick, he said, "Will you eat the food now or not?" Now for this little boy, he truly and sincerely believed that God was in front of him. For him, the deities were not mere statues, no, or stone deities, no. He truly believed. So what could God do? Moved by his devotion, God had to appear. He emerged from the deities and ate the food that he had served that little boy. And in fact, he ate so much that the little boy, he called out in desperation and he said, "Hey, leave me some. Don't eat it all. Don't eat it all." So the next day, he prepared more food, but even that was gone. It was gobbled up by God. With all the food gone, he had to borrow from the neighbors. So when the priest finally returned, he was furious to see how much the boy had spent. And he said to him, "How come? You brought so much food, you were here alone." So the little boy timidly said, "What could I do? God ate it all." So the priest, he retorted, "What nonsense is this? Do deities ever eat?" So the little boy said, "Well, come with me and I'll show you." So what did he do? He offered the food, and whatever he offered disappeared from in front of the eyes of the priest. Now, while the priest could not see who ate it, he did see that the food actually disappeared. But the little boy, again and again, each time he served, he relished the glory of God's divine beauty appearing before his eyes and accepting the offering. So, with this kind of faith, we remember God, who is seated in his own name. We have a choice to imagine the form in our own mind. However, if that is something that we are not able to do initially, Sri Maharaji tells us that we can take the help of a picture that we like, that our heart desires, or even a deity for that matter, and make our remembrance of God live, animated, not static, no, animated. Just as when we interact with people in the world, with those sentiments, we bring out God out of the deity, out of that image, and interact, serve, love, spend however we wish to spend time, in whatever way, however. So, this is the essence, the very essence of spiritual practice, is loving remembrance. Why? Because when we lovingly remember, even in the world, we have to engage our mind. Our mind. And wherever we engage our mind, that person or that object becomes the object of our worship, and accordingly, we reap the consequences. So, this practice of Karma Yoga is about transferring our attachment by way of practice. So when we engage in practice, 3 essential forms or steps that we must adopt: knowledge, chanting of the divine names, and loving remembrance, known as smaran or Rup Dhyan, as described by Sri Maharaji. So what will happen? Gradually and slowly, we will begin to feel joy, contentment, satisfaction, peace within us. All that happiness that we look for outside of us, whatever propels us to look for that happiness outside, will begin to develop, will begin to grow within us. And that feeling will be indicative of our progress on this path. So, gradually and slowly, with this practice, our heart will begin to become purified. Gradually and slowly. With that, as our practice will grow, our attachment will grow, and then our heart will be purified in that capacity gradually And when our heart will be fully purified, then our Guru will grace us with that divine treasure of eternal, perfect happiness. So our body will continue. Of course, we have to continue our work in the world, but attachment is key. So we have to grow that attachment to God or toward God while we live our life in the world. That is the essence, or this is the essence rather, of Karma Yoga, and how we can practically accomplish or gratify this life by means of this simple yet extremely effective and deeply profound practice of devotion and bhakti. So this concludes this topic, how to conquer material desires. Shrimat Sadguru Sarkar ki, Shrimat Yugal Sarkar ki, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe. So as a practical application of what I just described, with chanting, we will engage our mind, our heart, in the loving remembrance of Sri Radha Krishna. Just for a few minutes, and we'll conclude with Aarti. Radhe Govinda Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda,
Radhe Govinda Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Govinda Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda,
Radhe Govinda Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Govinda Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda,
Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda,
Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda,
Radhe Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Govinda Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Govinda Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Govinda Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Govinda Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
Radhe Radhe Govinda.
बोलिए श्री राधा कृष्ण भगवान की, श्रीमद् सद्गुरु सरकार की।
जयति जगद्गुरु गुरुवर की, गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। गुरु पद नख मणि चंद्रिका प्रकाश, जाके उर बसे ताके मोह तम नाश। जाके मात नाथ तब हाथ करवास, ताके होए माया मोह सब ही निराश।
रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की।
हरे
मन मोर चाल नारी नर हाथ। गुरु बिनु ब्रह्म श्याम मन दिन साथ। कोमल कृपाल बड़े कृपा सिंधु नाथ। पाके आज तू अनाथ हो सनाथ। इन्हीं के अधीन कृपा गिरधर की। गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की।
भक्ति
योग रस अवतार अभिराम। कर निगमागम समन्वय ललाम। श्यामा श्याम नाम रूप लीला गुण धाम। बाती रहे प्रेम निष्काम बिनु दाम। और ही सफल काया नारी नर की। गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की। लाल लीला का सलोना सुविलास। छाया दिव्य दृष्टि विच प्रेम का प्रकाश। वैसा ही विनोद वही मंजू मृदुहास। करे बस बर बस उच्चहास। झूमी चले चाल वही नटवर की। गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की। जयति जगत गुरु गुरुवर की। गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिले आरती रसिक वर की।
आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की। के बनवारी नथवारी की।
आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की। की बनवारी नथवारी की। दुहन सिर कनक मुकुट झलके। दुहन श्रुति कुंडल बल हलके। दुहन दृग प्रेम सुधा छलके। चसीले बैन रसीले नैन गसीले सैन। दुहन मैनन मन हारी की। बनवारी नथवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की। बनवारी नथवारी की। दुहनी दृग चितवनी परवारी। दुहनी लट लट कनी छवि न्यारी। दुहनी भौमत कनी अति प्यारी। रसन मुख पान हसन मुस्कान। रसन दम कान दुहनी बेसर छवि न्यारी की। बनवारी नथवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की। बनवारी नथवारी की। एक और पीतांबर पहरे, एक और नीलांबर लहरे, दुहन नर मोतिन छहरे, कंकनन खनक किंकिनिन झनक, नूपुरन बनक, तुहन रुन झुन धुनि प्यारी की। ये बनवारी नथवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की। ये बनवारी नथवारी की। एक सुर मोर मुकुट राजे, एक सिर चूनरी छवि साजे, दुहन सिर तिरछे भल ब्राजे, संग ब्रज बाल लाडली लाल, पाहगल जाल, कृपालु दुहन दृगचारी की। ये बनवारी नथवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की। ये बनवारी नथवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की। ये बनवारी नथवारी की।
मत्प्रियान् राधिका प्रियान्, मध्वो राधिका तस्मादपि गरीयान्यो कृपालुर्मे जगद्गुरु। गुरुं भजति श्रीकृष्णः, श्रीकृष्णं भजते गुरु। सिद्धान्ततस्त्व भेदेऽपि कृपालुर्मे गुरुर्महान्। शरण शरण महाप्रभु, तुम स्वामी हम दास, कीजय कृपा कृपालु मम, दीजय गुरु सहवास। तुम दीनन रखवार, हम अहंकार अवतार। अस करु कृपा कृपालु अब, दीन बनु सरकार। हों ऐसो हों पतित जो, पतित न आपुहि मान। ऐसे पतित विचित्र को पावन करो तब जान। सब भिखारी जगत के, जेतिक बोले अनंत भूमंडलाचार्य की जय। जगद्गुरु श्री कृपालु जी महाराज की जय। श्री रासेश्वरी राधा रानी की जय। श्री राधा माधव धाम की जय। श्री भक्ति धाम की जय। दुर्गा मैया की जय। जय जय श्री राधे। जय जय श्री राधे। जय जय